Welcome to the second volume of our LMS line series. A Princess Coronation, City of Carlisle, leads us into this story. This video will concentrate on the Stoke and Stockport areas and finish at Crewe. The last volume reached the Trent Valley from Euston. We begin at Stafford, 133 miles from the capital. Electric traction had reached Stafford from Crewe by 1963. Stafford-Trent Valley Junction saw the line from Wolverhampton join the West Coast Main Line into Stafford. Norton Bridge was 5 miles into the steady climb to Whitmore Summit. Steam, diesel and electric traction was evident in 1964. A 9F heads down the slow lines, followed by an English Electric Type 4 on the fast. A series of electric locomotives were built for the 25 kilovolt AC electrification from Manchester and Liverpool to Crewe, and eventually Euston. They worked express passenger and freight. E3050 was one of a class of 10 which became class 82 in BR days. Arriving at Stoke-on-Trent from the north in May 1964, the station was built in 1848 and had 2 through platforms and 2 centre roads. A bay platform on the downside served the line to Market Drayton. Notice the water column bag over the through down road. Our engine takes its fill from a more conventional water crane. We depart south, past Glebe Street signal box and past the locomotive shed built by the LNWR in the 1870s. This supplemented the North Staff's roundhouse to the west of the main line. The main line southeast to Uttoxeter and Derby had a ruling gradient of 1 in 100 for 4 miles to Mere. Stockport Heaton Mersey's 48161 heads south banked by one of Stoke's Ivat Moguls. The station had opened in 1894. It closed in November 1966. Continuing to Uttoxeter, we leave the Derby line and curve north towards the Churnet Valley line. First station was Roster, where the North Staff's line to Ashbourne diverged northeast, on through Alton Towers, serving the adjacent Gothic mansion, seat of the Earls of Shrewsbury. A local service between Uttoxeter and Leek of 2 trains daily survived, this the 1125 from Leek, before Oakermore and its 550-yard tunnel, then Cheddleton Tunnel, and we diverge at Leekbrook Junction onto the Waterhouses branch. This climbs steeply, at up to 1 in 45 to beyond Ipstones. Opened as the Leek, Culden Low and Hartington Light Railway in 1905, it lost its passenger services back in 1935. At Ipstones there is a tablet exchange from Leekbrook Junction. We are on an RCTS train to Culden Low, a link to a stone quarry. The locomotive used for this tour was Black 5 45020. The first Black 5 in service for the LMS, built in August 1934 by the Vulcan Foundry, a full 6 months before the first one emerged from Crewe Works. She was a Stoke engine at this time and stayed there until withdrawal in December 1965. The quarry produced stone ballast for railway purposes. The contractor supplied to the railway ceased in 1989. After running round its train, the track to Leekbrook is retraced. On approaching Leekbrook Junction, the Churnet Valley line is straight on to Cheddleton Tunnel. Our tour diverges towards Milton Junction. Leekbrook Halt was opened in 1904 and served the nearby North Staffordshire County Mental Asylum at Cheddleton. Sidings served for remarshalling of stone traffic. The rural landscape gives way to an industrial one, passing Milton Junction, and then Stoke Shed again as we arrive from the south. Stoke Shed had an allocation of about 10 264 tanks of Fowler, Stanier and Fairbairn designs at this time. As would be expected, there was also a lot of Black Fives, these standing around the 150-ton capacity mechanical coaling plant and ash disposal area. The shed closed in August 1967. Passing through Stoke Station, a DMU is in the Down Bay for Market Drayton, and a Black 5 is waiting on the Down Through Road. A4F waits for a path through Stoke near Etruria Junction, where this train took the loop line through Burslem to Kidsgrove, affording views of kilns for Stoke's China industry. Kidsgrove, 45020 ran round its train. Special provision was made in the sectional appendix for the propelling of passenger trains between the loop line and the main line at Loop Line Junction. The engine, now chimney first, is able to haul the train back through Stoke and Milton Junction. Now the tour visited the Biddulph Valley line to Congleton Lower. The line once served several colliery and ironstone branches. Regular passenger services ceased around 1927, although some excursion traffic continued into the 1960s. The bridge carries the North Staff's Macclesfield to Stoke main line. Straight ahead, the line continued for another mile to Brunswick Wharf Goods Depot, which closed in 1969. Care was used for 45020 to negotiate the treble slip points, and the use of point clips was obligatory. The driver cautiously watches his progress while the fireman busies himself preparing his fire. The tour participants line the old track bed on the connecting spur to the upper junction, which was taken out of use on the 1st of December 1963. All traffic then went out via Stoke, a long way round if it was destined for the Manchester area. An inspector clips the points. Some time was lost here, and the train departs for Stoke again, where, for the record, it arrived 55 minutes late. While 45020 comes off the train to turn and head the tour south, one of Stoke's 264 tanks is seen shunting. With some final waving by a tour participant, the train heads south out of Stoke, passing the back streets and kilns of the city before the shed is reached. The shed was closed in August 1967. Just before closure, the allocation was 35 engines of Stanier Black 5s, 280s and standard Class 4s with a couple of Ibert Moguls thrown in. 48768 had been at Stoke since June 1964. 48364 had one more month of work at Crewe South, but 45308 was withdrawn on closure of the depot. 45241 also found itself unwanted at the end, even though it was transferred to Crewe, but 75029, rushing past the unused North Staff's roundhouse, would live on in preservation. Four 5241 appears to be getting a load of slack from the mechanical coaling plant before moving off to the 1936 built overhead traversing ash handling plant, which could serve 3 roads. Next to use the coaler is 75029. Now the smoke box has to be emptied of char. Seven 5029, although dirty, still sports its Brunswick green livery from the days it worked on the Western region. After all, it was built at Swindon. It had been at Oxford, Swindon, Tyseley and Wrexham. With 20 others in the class, she had been fitted with a double chimney and blast pipe, in fact 3 over the years of different designs. In preservation, it was named the Green Knight. By January 1967, the electric overhead at Stoke was energised. Diesel traction was replacing steam also. 2 Bear Peacock-built Class 2s head a stone train north. And very appropriate for Stoke-upon-Trent, 86236 stops on a train to Manchester. She was named Josiah Wedgwood in November 1980 after the 18th century craftsman, founder of English pottery. Her pre-tops number was E3133. We now move north to Stockport via Cheadle-Hulme, where the Stoke line joined the Crewe to Manchester main line. 2 miles south of Stockport was Adswood. Extensive sidings were on the downside, installed in 1914 on land known as Daisy Field. 75043 of Aintree is shunting here in 1964. Taking the Buxton line at Edgeley Junction is 44781 and 45046 on a rail tour to Buxton via Whaley Bridge in 1968. The Stanlow to Leeds oil trains pass through Stockport, changing crews outside Edgeley Shed. Birkenhead's 9F 92106 brings the empties from Yorkshire through the station. The empty oil train is checked, as Speke Junction's 45417 has a partially fitted express freight bound for the Pennine route. The south end shunter's cabin is visible. Two 8Fs run off Stockport Viaduct en route to Edgeley Shed. Near the end of its days, Stockport Heaton Mersey's 48205 creeps through the station, its shed code crudely painted on the smokebox door. F 48699 heads back to Northwich with coal traffic. The star on the cabside denotes that 50% of reciprocating weights are balanced to work Class 5 express freights at 55 miles per hour maximum more smoothly. 44910 arrives with a freight destined for the station yard. The fireman is busy cleaning up his footplate as they meet the new order of electrification. Soon coal dust will be a thing of the past for footplate crews. Summer Saturdays saw many holiday trains passing through Edgeley, destined for Yorkshire and the North East. Llandudno's 45348 is heading for Leeds. An electric haul train arrives from Crewe. Waiting to take over another train for Yorkshire is Leeds Holbeck's Jubilee 45643 Rodney. She was withdrawn in January 1966. On departing, with changing positions of the regulator and cut-off, the fireman busies himself resetting the exhaust injector. Four 5027 of Edgeley Shed is backing on to take over another eastbound holiday train. Behind her is stablemate 44940. On the 2nd of July 1967, Britannia's 70,038 Robin Hood took over an SLS rail tour from Birmingham to York and returned via Huddersfield. She was allocated to Carlisle Kingmore at this time. She was in sparkling condition for this tour, but the following months would see her taken out of use at Carlisle. The last steam overhaul at Crewe Works was for 70,013 Oliver Cromwell. She is arriving with a rail tour on the 28th of April 1968, which took in Liverpool, Preston and Copy Pit. "70,013 is off to the shed, where Britannias were no strangers. Edgeley Shed had an allocation of 3 of them from May 1965, joined by 2 more the following year. 70,004 William Shakespeare was one of the first replacing Jubilees on the heavy night York mail trains. WD 280-90135 of Murfield arrives from Yorkshire. A Stockport Crewe will take over here for onward running to Liverpool via Northendon Junction. Stockport had Hughes Fowler crab moguls since their introduction for mixed traffic duties. Their own 42900 gets the road north past the Shed and Edgeley Junction number 2 box. Another crab to have a brief allocation to 9B was 42727, and she retained the cycling lion emblem on the tender. She was one of the last 2 of the class in service at Birkenhead before withdrawal in January 1967. In the late 1950s, 4F44271 was allocated to Edgeley and then on to Buxton, so she still became a regular visitor to the Shed. She is fitted with a tender cab and would be used as a snowplough engine in the winter. Before the Britannias arrived, the heavy mail trains were worked by Jubilees. 3 arrived in 1962 and thought to be the first named engines allocated here. 45632 Tonga was one of them. She was once a long sight engine. Transferred to Stockport in March 1964 for a year's service was 45654 Hood. Farnley's Alberta was visiting. Although a couple of brand new Black Fives had been at Edgeley for a short time in the 1930s, it was not until 1961 that the Shed got an allocation. 45225 was one of the first. They were kept reasonably clean, but someone had been careless with the sand by the look of the footplating. Ardsley's 90465 has worked over from the West Riding. Also from Yorkshire is Wakefield's B1 61024 ADAX. An 8F comes out of the tunnels under Booth Street with a loaded coal train. The driver comes across the footplate to look at our photographer Doug Cartmore and the shed in general. The locomotive just plods along by itself up the loop line for Edgeley Junction number 1 box. On the right is the cinder path leading down to the shed from a gate in Booth Street. An 8F moves up off the back of Shed Road. The shed building was a standard London and North Western construction with 8 covered roads. It was built in 1883 to overcome a need to cease light engine running from Longsight Depot to Stockport and to organise freight motive power to and from Yorkshire. Britannia 70,021 Morning Star comes off a freight to go to shed for water. She was an Edgeley engine from May 1966 until June 1967. She was also an ex-Western Region Britannia from Cardiff Canton, but was transferred to Trafford Park in July 1958 to work the Midland Main Line. Having obtained its water, 70,021 moves off shed to rejoin its freight. The hip roof cabin in the foreground was used by crews from the Control Relief Link. Nine Fs were regular visitors to the shed, working from Merseyside. 92022 of Speke Junction is one of 10 ex-Crossley examples. She makes her way onto the Ashpit Road for fire cleaning. 92070 of Birkenhead pulls away outside the shed with a stand-load to Leeds oil train. These trains were usually relieved by Stockport Crews here. Nine 2218 was the third from last steam locomotive built for British Railways in 1960. She leaves Edgeley's battered turntable. It is the 20th of April 1968, and the engine is about to take over an enthusiast excursion, which is arriving behind snowplough-fitted 48652 of Bolton Shed in a much cleaner condition. With a Buxton-bound DMU behind, the 9F gets away from Liverpool Lime Street via North Hendon Junction. Leaking steam from everywhere it shouldn't is Patrick Croft's Caprotti Standard 5 73133 with a transfer of freight from Adswood sidings. As two enthusiasts leave the shed site through the hole in the wall exit into Booth Street, Black 5 45046 moves to the Turntable Road. "45312 leaves on northbound freight near the end of its working life in 1968. The shed closed on the 5th of May 1968. The last working engine under its own steam to leave was 8F48170 on transfer to Patrick Croft. 48267 also saw one more month of service at Patrick Croft when Edgeley shed closed. "45200 was a long-time resident of Blackpool Shed, to which Stockport Crews would work excursions in the summer months in the 1960s. This engine had 2 years at Edgeley from February 1966. Some of the Stockport excursionists of old could have come from Woodrow's Hat Factory, whose tall chimney is seen in the background. And Edgeley's best-known engine had to be 45596 Bahamas. She served for 4 years and was the shed favourite of the shedmaster, Mr. Smith. She was even given a partial retube at the shed, very rare. After running a hot box, she was stored here for nearly 18 months before the Jubilee Society preserved her in 1967. Also to be preserved was 48151, but this one via Woodhams of Barry. Her last months were run with a certain amount of embellishment, cleaned up at Northwich and the application of white paint. In a terrible run-down condition is 92205, such a change from its days in 1960 when she worked on the Somerset and Dorset on the introduction of 9Fs there. On this day at Edgeley, she was a Wakefield engine, working cross-Pennine freights. And now, returning to that day of the 28th of April 1968 when Oliver Cromwell was present to work a rail tour, driver Jack Moores and fireman Eddie Stokes brings her to shed. Dropping the fire through open dampered doors was a performance of truly volcanic proportions. This was the method of coaling in the latter days of steam at Edgeley. An electric conveyor was obtained to ease the effort of coaling at the stage, which had a shallow ramp, and coaling high-sided tenders a very hard job. The 60-foot turntable was installed by the LMS after the grouping and converted to vacuum operation. On this occasion, the table had already been started by muscle power, but the vacuum was connected while revolving to assist. The driver supplies the vacuum from the brake ejector control in the cab. .7013 takes off across Stockport Viaduct. This was built in 1842. In 1887, work began on widening it, and this was completed in 1889 with 4 tracks. Edgeley's own Britannia 70,004 runs tender first off the viaduct towards the shed. In June 1967 she would be reallocated to Carlisle Kingmore. A Black 5 follows onto the viaduct with empty coal wagons before we leave Stockport, with Edgeley's own Black 5 45261, which was withdrawn in October 1967 and did not see the end of steam at 9B. Ardwick is 5 miles north of Stockport on the line to what was Manchester-London Road, now Piccadilly. Here the Great Central route went eastwards to Woodhead. A Black 5 comes off this line with a passenger train which had come from the New Mills line at Ashbury's and heads for Piccadilly. Coming out of Piccadilly is an electric haul train for Crewe via Stockport. At Piccadilly, 44681 comes off the through roads from Oxford Road, with the through working destined for Crewe. The name Piccadilly was bestowed on the station in 1960 when electrification at 25 kilovolts AC was completed. Fowler 264 tanks were commonplace from London Road days on the local passenger services. They also served on empty coaching stock duties. This empty stock train comes in behind a Black 5 on the 6th of March 1966 for a William Deacon's Bank rail tour using Visiting Pacific 60019 Bittern. With much ado and mass trespass, Bittern departs for Crewe and Derby. And after the departure of the A4, hardly anybody pays attention to the Black 5. Bittern, still under the wires, passes Sandbach en route for Crewe. After a visit to Crewe Works, the train continued on the North Staff's route to Derby via Alsager and Stoke. The signal box was once much taller here. The structure and station buildings were typical North Staffordshire Railway. Returning to Sandbach on the 11th of September 1965, we see the arrival from Manchester of the SLS Shropshire Rail Tour with Black 5 44818 of Newton Heath. After another 5 miles south, we arrive at Crewe. The North Shed had closed to steam by May 1965, all steam engines for the next 2 years being serviced at Crewe's South Shed. On the 13th of February 1965, the Royal Scots reign on the LMS rails was drawing to a close. The RCTS arranged a rail tour to commemorate their passing, and 46115 Scots Guardsman was cleaned up brilliantly by Crewe North to work the tour from Crewe to Carlisle and back, out via the Settle and Carlisle, and return over Shap. Driver Fisher was in charge throughout. The replacement nameplates were made of plywood. Crewe Station opened in 1837 and quickly became a junction. By 1896 it was a real bottleneck, and the LNWR decided on a mammoth rebuilding programme. These scenes are on the independent lines, burrowing under Crewe Station complex dating from this time. By September 1964, the last Princess Coronation Pacifics were withdrawn, and their reign taking expresses to Euston was over. City of Nottingham departs south in early 1964. Before full electrification of the West Coast main line took place, the English electric Type 4s were used. D216 Campania leaves for the south. Steam around Crewe survived until late 1967. This 8F is heading north. .45350 survived to the very end of steam in 1968. At this time she was allocated to Stoke. In 1964, 45674 Duncan departs from the north end of Crewe Station. She was withdrawn shortly after this view at the end of the summer timetable. Allocated to Crewe North, she served the LMS and BR for 29 years. At the same time, but only 20 years old, City of Nottingham again, running light engine along platform 4 from its home shed Crewe North to take up a short working to Shrewsbury out of the bay platform at the south end of the station. The Shrewsbury line passed Gresty Lane number 1 box, which also saw the exit from Crewe South shed. Behind 44829 is seen the large Crewe South junction box with over 200 levers. 44829 was a Crewe South engine at this time. With the remodelling of Crewe at the turn of the century, a new shed was built called Crewe South and was traditionally a freight shed of 12 roads. A concrete coaling plant was built in 1920, probably the first of its type in the country, of 250 tons capacity. Carnforth's 44905 takes its fill. There was a steel-framed wagon hoist to load the bunker. To the west of the shed were the running lines from Shrewsbury. Crossing the independent goods lines by a bridge, a Black 5 heads into Crewe with a freight in 1966. In the foreground is the 70-foot turntable installed in 1945. Before this, and indeed after, larger engines than 50-foot wheelbase could be turned on the triangle between Salop Goods Junction and Gresty Lane number 1. The last steam overhaul at any BR works for service use was given at Crewe to 70,013 Oliver Cromwell, and she emerged from the works on February the 5th, 1967. She was brought onto Crewe South shed for initial running in before going back to Carlisle Kingmore. Her nameplates were held at Crewe Works for safekeeping. Throughout 1967, Crewe South serviced steam, including the Britannias that worked in from Kingmore and would not be as fortunate as Oliver Cromwell. The original LNWR coal stage on the left still survived as it held up the shed's water tank. We leave Crewe South shed with one of the station pilots going on duty, Ginty 47450, which had been at Crewe since the 1950s. 47482 was the last of its class to get an overhaul. Very unusually, this was at Darlington in April 1964, and she returned with numbers on the side tanks in typical northeastern style. Black 5, 44684, was one of the last of her class of 842 to be built. She came new to Crewe North and stayed at Crewe all her life, ending at Crewe South. The English Electric Type 4's reign on the West Coast Main Line came to an end early in 1985. Just before the end, these two, now BR Class 40, numbers 152 and 086, head a special out of Crewe. E3046 was the first of 10 electric locos built by Bear Peacock, eventually Class 82. The train is the Red Rose, due in at Liverpool at 4 o'clock. E3008 was in the first generation of 25 kV AC locos of 1960 when electrification began between Crewe and Manchester. She was built by the Birmingham Railway and Carriage Works. The different body styles of these two show the English electric version and E3071 built at BR's Doncaster Works in 1962. All the early electrics carried 2 pantographs. With the opening of full electric services from Euston, 100 new Class AL6, later Class 86 locos were constructed by BR and the Vulcan Foundry of English Electric. They were more powerful and carried only 1 pantograph. This is the Royal Scot train when in 1966 it still ran with tartan carriage boards and back corridor connection display board. But we end this volume in the days of steam. Britannia 70002 Geoffrey Chaucer will hand over to the new electric traction and retire to Crewe South Shed. At the south end of Crewe in 1964, a Black 5 arrives along number 2 platform. 47482, with its distinctive tank side number, is a pilot denoted by the 2 lamps on front and rear buffer beams, and will remove the Black 5's stock. 46235, City of Birmingham, is retiring to the North Shed, having worked up from Glasgow. She, of course, was eventually preserved in the city of her name. With the long open platforms, Crewe was a mecca for enthusiasts watching the comings and goings of the steam locomotive. 2 Black 5s run past the middle shed of Crewe North, opened in 1865 and containing 12 robes. In the background, the massive Crewe North's coaling plant. We will return to Crewe in future volumes of this series to continue our look at more ex-LMS lines in the steam era. For now, we leave it to 46228 Duchess of Rutland to sign off this volume. We hope you have enjoyed the journey.